Do you think only small animals face hardships in their lives? Think again. In the circus, majestic lions and swift cheetahs perform amazing tricks, impressing everyone. But behind the bright lights, these animals endure tough conditions. One cheetah, adored by the crowd for his stunning act, faces a heartbreaking fate as he grows older and weaker. What happens to him will leave you in shock and sadness. It's a story that reveals the dark side of entertainment and the price these animals pay. In a quiet town in Russia, there was a special place called the Rehabilitation Center for Animals. It wasn't just any center. It was a sanctuary for animals that had been hurt, mistreated, or taken away from their natural homes. One day, something extraordinary happened. A young cheetah named Toby arrived. Unlike most cheetahs, Toby had never run free in the wild. Instead, he had spent his life in a circus, performing tricks for crowds. The circus had taken away his freedom, leaving him both physically and emotionally broken. When Toby arrived at the center, he was in terrible shape. His body was weak, his fur had lost its shine, and he couldn't even stand on his own. He had been overworked and starved, pushed to the brink of death by the circus. When he was no longer able to perform, they discarded him, sending him to the center because he was of no use to them anymore. Toby couldn't even lift his head when he was placed in his new enclosure. Instead of showing any interest in his surroundings, he simply lay there, breathing weakly with his eyes closed. The next morning, the staff went to check on Toby, but he was still lying in the same position. He hadn't eaten, drank, or even lifted his head. Worry filled the air as everyone feared the worst, that Toby wouldn't survive the day. In a desperate effort to help him, they called Elizabeth, a young and caring veterinarian with a deep love for animals. As soon as Elizabeth arrived, she quickly realized that Toby was battling severe pneumonia. His breathing was heavy and uneven, a clear sign his lungs were struggling, but there was more to his pain. Toby wasn't just physically sick, he was emotionally shattered. Elizabeth knew it would be a tough journey to save him. She prescribed medication to treat the pneumonia, but another problem loomed. Toby refused to eat. Without food, his body wouldn't regain the strength to heal, no matter how much medicine he received. But how could they get a cheetah, who had lost all hope, to eat and fight for his life? Elizabeth understood that she couldn't force Toby to eat, and no one dared to hand-feed a predator. Despite his weakness, Toby was still a cheetah, and his instincts could make him dangerous. Approaching him carelessly could lead to serious injury. But Elizabeth was determined to save him. She saw more than just a frail, broken animal. She believed that deep inside, Toby still had the heart of a fighter. One evening, after everyone had gone, Elizabeth decided to take a chance. She quietly unlocked the door to Toby's cage and stepped inside. Toby barely moved, too weak to react, only lifting his head slightly. Elizabeth dipped a small piece of meat in water and cautiously held it near his mouth. Slowly, Toby began to lick it. Then, as if realizing he had no other choice, he took a small bite. Elizabeth's heart filled with hope. It was a tiny victory, but it was a sign that Toby wasn't ready to give up just yet. From that moment on, Elizabeth visited Toby every night. She brought him pieces of meat soaked in water, and to her surprise, he started eating them. With each bite, Toby gained a bit of strength. Elizabeth even mixed his medicine into the food, knowing this was the only way to treat his illness. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the weak, dying cheetah began to change. His fur started to shine again, and his eyes, once dull and lifeless, regained their brightness. Then, one day, something amazing happened. When Elizabeth entered his cage, Toby did something she never expected. Instead of lying still, he stood up and walked toward her. Elizabeth froze, her heart racing. She was scared that the wild predator might attack her, but instead, Toby gently rubbed against her leg, just like a house cat would. It was a sign of affection, something no one had seen coming. Elizabeth cautiously reached out and stroked his head. In that moment, a special bond formed between them, one that went beyond words or explanations, filled with trust and love. It was a magical moment for both of them. From that day forward, Toby and Elizabeth were inseparable. The once dying cheetah had come back to life, not just because of the medicine and food, but because of the love and care Elizabeth had shown him. Every time she approached his cage, Toby would rush to greet her, rubbing against her and making soft, purring sounds. It was as if they had formed a special friendship, with a deep understanding of each other's feelings. But, like all good things, their time together had to come to an end. The circus that owned Toby wanted him back. Now that he was healthy, they planned to make him perform again. Elizabeth's heart broke at the news. She knew Toby didn't belong in a cage, performing tricks for people's entertainment. He deserved to roam free, but there was nothing she could do. The circus had legal ownership, and Toby had to go. On the day of Toby's departure, Elizabeth stood by, her heart heavy, as the transfer vehicle pulled up. Tears filled her eyes while Toby was loaded inside. The cheetah, now full of life, seemed to sense what was happening. He growled and hissed, refusing to cooperate with the handlers. Toby didn't want to leave either. As the vehicle drove away, Elizabeth stood there, heartbroken, watching until it disappeared from sight. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't truly goodbye, and that someday their paths would cross again. Years passed, and life at the rehabilitation center continued. Elizabeth worked hard, caring for animals in need. Yet, she never stopped thinking about Toby. She searched for him everywhere, visiting circuses and zoos, but no one could tell her where he had gone. It felt as if he had vanished. Still, she held on to hope, even as each year made it seem less likely she would see him again. Then, one day, something amazing happened. News reached the rehabilitation center that a blind cheetah had been brought in from a nearby circus. Elizabeth's heart raced with excitement. Could it be Toby? She hurried to the clinic, her mind racing with possibilities. When she arrived, she eagerly asked to see the animal, hoping against hope that her dear friend had returned to her after all this time. As Elizabeth approached the cheetah's enclosure, she called out softly to him. The animal, startled by her voice, lifted his head, and Elizabeth's heart nearly stopped. It was Toby. Even though he looked weak and had endured years of suffering, she recognized him instantly. The cheetah who had once been her friend was back, but he was more broken than ever. Toby's body was covered in scars, and his fur was patchy and dull. His eyes, once bright and full of life, were now clouded with blindness. Elizabeth's heart ached for him. He had been through so much, starved, tortured, and forced to perform tricks that shattered his spirit. Yet, against all odds, Toby had survived. Now, he had come back to the one person who had shown him kindness. Without thinking, Elizabeth rushed into the cage, calling his name. When Toby heard her familiar voice, he mustered the last bit of his strength to move toward her. He rested his head on her chest, just like he had done years ago, seeking comfort. Elizabeth held him close, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, two old friends were reunited, ready to heal together after so much pain and loss. And then, Toby took his final breath. He passed away in the arms of the one person who truly loved him, the only one who had shown him real kindness. Elizabeth felt her heart shatter into pieces, but deep down, she knew that Toby was finally free from pain. He would never suffer again. This story goes beyond the bond between a human and an animal. It serves as a reminder of the harsh reality many animals face in captivity. Circuses take these beautiful creatures from their natural homes, forcing them to live in tiny cages, perform tricks, and endure terrible suffering, all for entertainment and profit. Animals like Toby should not be treated as objects for amusement. They deserve to roam free in the wild, where they truly belong. That's all for today. Now, it's your turn to share your thoughts about this story. What's the next story you'd like to know? Let us know in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe so you won't miss any of these amazing videos on the Wild Wonder.